Okay, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're continuing in the Ben Ashri. We're in Parshat Toldot. And before we begin, as we mention every week, the learning should be Lili Nishmas Tetzadik Miranana Rabbi Yitzchak Ben Asher Anshel HaKoyin Habraman. And this piece that we're going to learn is going to be a little bit of a peek behind the veil. What exactly happened in Eretz Plishtim in Gerar between Avimelech and Yitzchak? Why did Yitzchak specifically go to Eretz Plishtim? It's true that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not want him to go to Mitzrayim, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu did not want him to leave Eretz Yisrael proper, but there were other areas he could have went. And as a side note, we see from here that while we don't know exactly where Eretz Plishtim is, we do know that it's part of Eretz Yisrael, because otherwise he would not have been able to stay there, or not have been able to go there to start with. What exactly was Yitzchak trying to accomplish? As we're going to learn, he actually initially failed, and it took tremendous koiches to overcome the tzad hatumah and the klipas to be able to complete his objective, which we're going to learn. That objective, as we're going to see, was accomplished by learning Torah, specifically Mechadish Chidushim, and how that connects to the arguments that they had with the wells, and how ultimately Yitzchak Avinu was successful and won the battle to the point that Avimelech and all that he represented was machniah himself to Yitzchak Avinu. Vayeshev Yitzchak Begra. Yesh Lefarish. Now we're on page Tuf Tes Zayin, and we're going to take a peek behind the veil. Api Chasidus and Kabbalah. It says in Gemara Yuma, Mi Oilam Loi Pasek HaYeshiva Masenu. The Avos HaKadoshim always learned in yeshiva, as we know from Avram Avinu, we know from Yitzchak, we know for sure from Yaakov Avinu. We know that Yaakov Avinu sent Yehuda to Mitzrayim early in order to set up a yeshiva. Va'pirish Lefi Zeh Vayeshev. That's what the word Vayeshev is coming to teach us. Vayeshev is a language of yeshiva, of sitting. Yitzchak also yeshiva lilmod taraseinu akdosha. K'ma shekasav hamagid mitrisk b'sifrei Magen Avram. Yitzchak gerar gematria Torah. So Vayeshev, where Vayeshev Torah, he was sitting to learn Torah. Ulahamshich hapirish b'zeh. To take this idea a step further, says the Ben Ashri, Vayishalu anshe hamakom. The people of the place asked Yitzchak, Hainu ha-talmidim. The Ben Ashri says these were the talmidim shabo lilmod etzla, that Yitzchak Avinu opened up a yeshiva and people came to learn. And they asked him li'ishtoi regarding his wife. Now the Ben Ashri says it's true, api pshat, li'ishtoi means his wife, but api chasidus and Kabbalah, ishtoi means shefa. Maus ha-shefa shemashpia lehem. V'romzu ze b'teves li'ishtoi. That is a hinted in the word li'ishtoi, ki isha hi bechinas mekabel. A lady is in a bechina of a mekabel. In the world, Hashem created everything as a giver and a receiver. It doesn't necessarily mean in a bad way, but there are certain things that give and there are certain things that receive. So the Talmidim asked Yitzchak, al ishtoi, meaning to say, if we learn Torah, what are we going to get from it? What shefa are we going to get from it? Now we know that the midah of Yitzchak Avinu was a gevura. And the reason that they asked him is because they did not want to attach themselves to Yitzchak if he was midah sadin. They felt it was too much for them. And he said, that even though the Torah is mipi hagvura from the tzaradin, which is midah sadin, afa pikein ikro michochmo nafka. The ikro place of the Torah is a place called Chachma, which means that the Talmidim came to Yitzchak and they said, we want to learn Torah, but what type of Torah is this? If it's Midas Hadin Torah, we don't want to be connected to it. So Yitzchak said, no, it's Achoisi, as it says, Achoisi, Rayoisi, Tamosi, that it's true that there's a part of it that's Midas Hadin, but the ikro part comes from the Chachma Ilah. The Chachma Kula Basrayer. The Torah is Kula Chachma. When you learn Torah, Yitzchak was telling them that even though the main part, at least for me, is midas adin, everything that's good comes through from that. However, the Torah tells us that even still, Avimelech and his servants, they were tremendous klipas, which means they were tremendous part Tuma. They overcame Yitzchak. Gabru kol kach at sheyibatlu hayeshiva v'gorshut Yitzchak. right? The pasuk says, if you see that they actually kicked Yitzchak out, they threw him out. They told him, get out of here. Now, how could it be if he's kedusha? The answer is that since the klipas were so strong that they pushed Yitzchak Avinu out, whatever he tried to do wasn't working, to the point that even though materially he became blessed, which was a part of his learning, he wasn't able to mashpia the surrounding area, and they pushed him out. Abu Yitzchak learned Yarish, even though he kicked out and he was embarrassed and he was humbled and he saw that everything that he tried to do fell apart, he didn't give up. He didn't give up to fall into their hands. He bottled Ma'abatz's Torah and to stop spreading Torah. He went to the next closest place and he set up a new yeshiva. It says again by Yosher Sham to teach us that once again he started a yeshiva. However, says the Ben La'ashri, he learned that his method would not work to overcome the klipas in Eretz Plishtim. In Eretz Yisrael it would work. But since the Eretz Plishtim is steeped in Tumah, unfortunately, as I believe is a big problem today, and requires special tikkun to overcome this problem. As we know, every physical problem is based on a spiritual problem. And therefore he started a new chiddush, a new way, lachbor be'eres mayim. The Torah says that what? To dig wells of water. In our terms, he had to dig out in the Torah. Right? Be'er hamayim is a reference to the Torah. Lachbor, which means Yitzchak Avinu understood that over here he had to drill down, dig deep into the Torah to pull out chidushim. By doing that, that would actually pull out the nitzotzes hakdusha that was trapped in Eretz Plishtim, and that was the only way. Hainu lahamshich shefa chasodim. Right? Water, we know, is a dugma of chesed. Why is it a dugma of chesed? Because when a person is tameh, he goes into the mikvah, he now becomes a new person. That's chesed. An isha who is a nida, and now goes into the mikvah, and she's no longer a nida, and can be with her husband, that's a chesed. A ger, who at one point is a non-Jew completely, goes into the mikvah, comes out, now becomes a Jew. That's a tremendous chesed. That is a reference to the Torah. When you learn Torah in a way of mechadish chidushim, you bring chesed into the world. That's why great tzaddikim that are able to be mechadish chidushim are able to bring chasadim into the world. Right? There are many stories. The famous story of the Taz. The Taz wrote a special kameya. A kameya is like a parchment. Officially, it has shemus hakdoshim, and it's put in a special pouch, and a person wears it, and it's supposed to give him spiritual protection. There's two famous kameyas that Yedua known from the Ohr HaChaim and from the Taz. And now, those kameyas later on were opened up, which is not something you're supposed to do, because if you open up the kameya, it loses its power. But they did open it up, and they found that the Taz's kameya said, please help this individual based on the Torah that has yageya on a toisis and chulin. Similar thing was written by the Ohr HaChaim. And there's another famous story, I believe it's with the Ksav Sofer, if I'm not mistaken, that somebody, or his son, or Shimon Sofer, that's a lady knocked on the door and said that her daughter was going through tremendous labor and they were having problems. So he gave her his scarf that he was wearing that had the yagia of learning Taisus. He said, put this around the lady, and in the schus of the Torah that I learned, it will help her out. And once they put it on the lady, Baruch Hashem, the child came out. So you see that when a person is miyagea and Torah, specifically uncovering chidushim that are hidden in the realms of Shamayim, you now open up a new source of chasadim into the world. And that's what Yitzchak Avinu did. That's what it says, that Yitzchak now started to redig the wells like his father did. Why? Because that is derech hachasidus, derech chesed. So Yitzchak, it only says that he started to dig new wells once he was thrown out of Gerar, and he started a new path, a new way of learning, and that's when the Torah says he started digging again. And all his avodah now was to bring chasadim into the world. So how did he do this? It's very interesting. We know that Yitzchak is always midas adin, midas hagvura. So how could he change his way? That's the hint of the word vayachperu, he dug. She'asa kemidas hachafirus legalis arfer. What's the midas hachafira? What's digging? Digging is you dig into the earth to reveal what's covered, right? There's gold in the ground. There's oil in the ground. There's minerals, metals in the ground. Now, we can't see that. You have to dig deep. And digging deep is very difficult. You have to sift. You have to cut the ground. You have to knock the ground. You have to crush it. You have to, as we all understand, it's not easy to dig it out. And even when you get to the gold, you got to cut around it. You have to pull it out. You have to refine it. And the steps with the gold, with diamonds, with metals, that is all a play, a dogma of how to be mechalish chedushim. You first have to dig the Gemara, you have to dig it out, you have to sift it, you have to crush it, you have to know it. And finally, when you get to the point of the chiddush, now you have to cut it out, you have to refine it, you have to think about it, you have to polish it. Kedaima v'kedaima. But once you do that, you now have a new metal in the world. You have a new valuable asset in the world, the gold, the oil. Lahav the elfei alafa. When it comes to learning Torah, the same thing. You now have a new asset that was hidden in the spiritual world, and now you brought it into this world. And now that shines brightly. It gives you, kaviyachol, something valuable. And that is the secret of the word vayachbru. And you remove, same thing, right? You're digging for water. How do you dig for water? You got to dig down and deep and down and deep. And finally, when you hit the source, the water rushes out, and now people have what to live on. Not only do you have what to live on, listen to the beauty. You could drink, you can now water the fields, you can now make materials, right? In order to make cement, you need water. Lahavdil, so too, when you come to a new source in the learning, a new chiddush, that new chiddush brings forth a spiritual water. That spiritual water cleanses you, gives you to drink, allows you to water other areas, allows you to make material stuff with it. So that's what Yitzchak Avinu did, and that benefited everybody. Once you dig a well and you hit a source, that benefits everybody, not just you yourself. It benefits everybody. And that's the hinting and the secret of what Yitzchak did. Ken avdi gemachulikim. Nachal noitrikin noitze chesed lalafim. Lloyd ben nachal il makoil gemachut tzadik aleph shilu havaya adnos. Shayidei elu chidushim. Through all these chidushim, right? Think about it on a physical way. When you have dry land, it's all hard to to plant, and there's no water, and people are thirsty, and you can't wash yourself. And now you dig out the water that's hidden in the ground, and it rushes up. It now sweetens and makes all the area around you arable, makes it beautiful. It's matek hesadinim. So too, when a person learns Torah and is mechalish kedushim, v'izgalish b'pnimius shem hakodesh Elokim, and now you reveal the Shem Elokim, Chassadim Gemur, Muzer Sh'ama Vayimtzu Bermayim Chayim. This is the power of Chidush Torah. You hit a new source. You now brought forth water in an area where there's no water. You now brought forth Torah in an area where there's no Torah. That benefits everybody, even indirectly, right? Like we mentioned, when you bring forth water, all the areas now become lush, become areas that you could plant, can grow seeds, right? You can now understand the relation between water and Torah, how it benefits everybody. Reb Shach used to tell his Talmidim and all of people that came to him, plant yeshivas and kolim throughout Eretz Yisrael. Even in areas where there's no Yiddishkeit, even with these areas that were anti-Torah, eventually the Torah will flourish and spread out. And as we see happened, there was a kibbutz that Rav Shach sent a koil to learn, and he said one day the people of the kibbutzim will come to this yeshiva in order to learn Torah. And that's what happened. 30 years later, the people from this kibbutz, which were known to be anti-Torah, eventually the ruach of the Torah spread even to them. When you dig water out from the ground and it now covers the area, even areas that are very difficult to plant seeds because of the dryness, become moist, become available to grow. But even still, it didn't help him. That they still fought with him, because they started to realize that Yitzchak Avinu was progressing in his attempt to draw out the nitzotzos. So they still fought with him. To the point that the Talmidim started even leaving him there. That Akein lo yomer vayomer el leimor lonu el gematria lekim hamayim gematria madim mazol shaleisov shaklipas vasitr achar yonkim adinum shenestafim misham hakadosh lekim gedul ledechen v'hainu sheisloinenu v'yurivim yitzchak sha al yedei yeshivasa shemarbitster saying like Dosh started fighting with him. Why were they fighting with him? They were telling him that the more wells you're digging, the more you're weakening us. L'talmidim b'teilim adinim. U'memela haloi b'zeh posik inikasam. Ach Yitzchak lo pachad mehem. Yitzchak didn't care. He said, I'm continuing to dig. I'll continue to build more yeshivas and more yeshivas and more yeshivas. I won't stop. V'shokad lafarsem shegam alikim ikar pnei masech chasad gemurim. V'lomad im aboim l'yeshiva at sheyinatzeach haseklipos, until he overcame the klipos to the point that Avimelech and his general and his compadres, as it says in the Chumash, which were all the leaders, the head of the klipos, had to come to Yitzchak and beg him to stop and make a peace deal with him. They had no strength to go against him. Midas HaChesed. Yegia b'Torah, right, is the secret that protects all. The Chazon Ish said that as long as Rav Baruch Ber and Rav Shimon Shkop, who were at that time the dugma of Yegias HaTorah, the Nazis were not able to overcome the areas that they live in. And if you look, areas where Rav Baruch Ber and Rav Shimon Shkop, until they passed away, they were free from the Nazi regime. The Taz, who was also a tremendous miyagea, the Cossacks did not enter his city. The Ruach HaTorah that he had, the Yagia he had, was able to protect him. Now, it's true that not always, sometimes there's tremendous klipas and tremendous things, but you see from here that a person is Miyagea b'Torah, is Mechadish Chidushim. That brings tremendous bracha to the world. And what Avimelech and his servants tried to strengthen the Tzad HaTumah, they could not help him. This is all Kabbalah stuff. It's all above my head, but it's pointing out that Avimelech tried to push back against Yitzchak and he was not successful. That Yitzchak Avinu kept on digging deeper and deeper and in other places and in other areas to show that the Torah is pure chasadim. And even the dinim are also inside our chasadim, they're just trapped. Just like the ground, even though the ground on top does not look like it can fertilize anything, but they all have nutrients. A little lower, a little deeper, they all have chiyas of Hashem. As ein tzarich b'klipas shurak ritzua bishul alekim chayavo v'in magil hem shum yinika. And the Torah tells us after Yitzchak was kicked out and after he made a new yeshiva on a new derech, and they still fought with him, and he kept on digging more and more wells. Eventually they succumbed to the power of Yitzchak. To the point that Avimelech and his general had to come to Yitzchak. Right? They threw him out, they kicked him out, but Yitzchak overcame them to the point that they had to humble themselves to him, and to ask that he now makes a bris with them. This is the point, that he should not finish them off. Why Yitzchak agreed with it until the end of times, this is already above the topic of the shir. But you see from here that if Yitzchak would have continued, he would have been mevatel the klipa of Plishtim. And they said, please, make a peace treaty with us, leval yishtadel hu uvana levatel sidra achra, until the end of time. Ramaz le ba'omer ata baruch Hashem, baruch tzifa rav, and sheyicholum leYisrael levar rak reish beis nitzotzes. Klal Yisrael could only take out 202 nitzotzes, because of Sfarim HaKadoshim. Al Pasuk Vayitzba Yosef Hashem, because of Sfarim HaKadoshim, the Plishtim Nishroshim Beklipa HaYosef Gedolah. This is where we were heading to. The Plishtim, whatever they represent, is the hardest klipa, is the biggest klipa. And if they fall, it's finished. It's true that Mitzrayim was the source of Tumah. Mitzrayim was a major place of Tumah, but the Plishtim were attached to the greatest klipa. and they wanted Yitzchak to stop. Shenikris plishtim al shem shepolshim v'nichnasim klei zayin shalem afilu etzel tzadik gadol. That they go attack. They're so strong, the klipa, that they're not even afraid to attack a tzaddik. And that's why Yitzchak, only through his midas hagavura and attaching himself to the derech of Avraham Avinu, was able to weaken them. That's why today we still have this problem. There's such a strong klipa that the more Torah we learn, the more they fight back. Like they and now he takes it to the next point. Yitzchak Avinu wanted to instill so much kedusha into Esav that Memela, the klipa, would burn away, would fall away. Unfortunately, it didn't work, which is something we'll have to wait for a later time, right? Because Rivka Imenu understood that Esav's klipa was very strong, and on the contrary, by giving him kedusha would only make him stronger. She told him to stop. That's why she made Yaakov Avinu take the brachas, because giving Esav the brachas would only make him 100 times worse. And in Mela, we see from here the tremendous koyach of learning Torah, befrat mechadish chedushim apia emes. When a person does that and is mechadish nu halachos, nu havanas in Torah, he brings a new source of kedusha and shefa into the world. A dogma of digging a well for water, how that benefits the entire world materially, so too digging a new well, kaviyachol, in Torah, and bringing this forth new ideas, right? That brings spiritual and material benefit to the entire world as well. Amen. Ken Yeratzon.